Does anybody else remember when the Storm School used to be the damage dealer of Wizard101? Well, that's why I made the school originally when I started the game. No more is that the case ever since the Rochambeau has come out. In PvE, the school is still doing pretty good in terms of, damage output. I don't think anybody would dispute that point anymore. Aside from the dual school cosplayers, you might see like a death running around, right? In PvP, it's a whole different story, and in today's video, I'm going to explain why that's the case and how King Sal can fix the school and keep the player base happy, alongside with talk about the current issues with it in the meta. Now in this video, obviously if you don't know me, I am the first person to actually get Warlord at the hardest league to play it at, which is max level. And the only other Warlord Storm, which is Soul Sword as well, has helped me with this video and talk about the issues. So everything in this video comes from the people that have actually understand the school, have made the school because they like it, and actually made strategies to achieve the highest top level of play in the game. Hello everybody and welcome back to another video on the channel, and in today's video I want to talk about how Wizard101 or King Sal can fix the School of Storm in Wizard101. Now it's obviously no secret in PvP, at least, Storm has been notoriously the worst school of all of 5th Age. It's only been actually playable in 2.5 metas of the entire 13 metas we've had in 5th Age. I believe that's around like 19% of an entire age the school has actually been playable in. So it's pretty bad. To put that in perspective, guys, if you go to the leaderboard and you look at balance, myth, death, ice, and life, for the past, 13 seasons, they're all on the top of the boards. There's so many of them, at least like 10 plus within the first, Captain Plus of the leaderboard pages. So yeah, in this video, I want to talk about how Wizard101 can actually make the school better. I did make a video talking about all the problems that are weighing down on Storm, both directly and indirectly in the meta. But this video is going to be more about solutions and how to actually fix the school. So the first thing I want to talk about is going to be, obviously the stats, right? I feel like most people say, okay, just give Storm a stat buff, including myself. Now, the reason I think this is both right and actually wrong is, the reason I think it's right is because the game design philosophy, right? And I'll talk about this later on in the video. But essentially, if every school is hitting like a Storm, which they are in the meta, right? The developers have confirmed this. Essentially, the school with the most drawbacks, which is Storm, is indirectly going to be worse, and that's how the game is designed by the philosophy. So, what the developers could do to compensate for that is actually make Storm dual school efficient and good like the other schools can be, right? For example, on a balance right now in the meta, I can power spells to balance death, myth, life, and Storm if I really wanted to, and still hit my stat maxes no problem. But on a Storm in the meta, I can maybe get max accuracy for just my school. I can't dual school, and my stats are still worse, right? So basically what I'm saying is you could buff up the dual school component on Storm and make it better to compete with the dual school on the other schools, which would indirectly make it better in more matchups and make it more competitive in general. Because at the end of the day, the easier schools that can cover more ground with access to more dual school and better cards, obviously you're going to have a higher win rate, which is what you see reflect in the leaderboard in all of the 13th season. I know the devs say their combat model is supposed to favor Storm, even though the meta tends to disagree with that, unfortunately. I do recognize that, we have powerful cards, our damage is pretty high, our Pierce isn't bad as well. I think what a lot of Storms would like to see in general is King Sal revert things back to when Storm was a damage and a Pierce school. Because right now, we just lose, and we just lost Pierce too. So you could at least give us our Pierce back to at least be like a damage school like we used to be. Because unironically, Storm is the worst school at hitting when it's supposed to be the hitting school of Wizard101 right now, well, in the PvP meta, right? So it just kind of is what it is at that point. And I think if they buffed up the Pierce to compete with Fire and Myth, because Storm stats are so bad, I think that'd be a solution. Or you could bring up the health to be around Fire and Myth. So at that point, you know, the stat differences are subtle. Like, they get 3 more Pierce, but you get 10 more damage, but we all have the same health, and the DPP fluctuates with the resist, right? I think either one of those solutions would be good, in my opinion. Now, on the topic of stats, I do want to talk about the other schools in the meta, right? We talked about Storm directly itself, right? But now let's talk about the other schools that are causing a lot of problems for Storm in the meta, okay, guys? So we have schools like Balance. We have schools like Myth. We have schools like Death. Now, I want you to ask yourself, guys, what do these 3 schools have in common? Right? They're all in the middle of the stat wheel. Okay? So what I say by the middle of the stat wheel, guys, is they're all in the middle of, like, the damage per pip. They're not super low damage per pip, like Ice, like Life. Right? They're not super high like Storm and Fire. They're right in the middle. So what that allows these schools to do is simply get some of the best stat, which is health, get some of the best resist, damage, and Pierce. Right? Now, with the newer Shambo identity that's come out over the past year, or I think 2 years maybe, I don't know how long it's been, schools naturally with the best stats and the best cards are going to run the meta. Right? That's just kind of how it is. Right? So, when you give a school every single stat on the Rochambeau wheel, you're going to have a problem, right? So, if we look at Balance or Death or Myth, right? What do these schools have? They have Resist, they have Health, they have Pierce, and they have Damage, okay? So, when you give every school the same stat, this is what your leaderboard is going to look like. Now, this guy is a Jade, so we'll just act like he's not here and pretend he's not there on the leaderboard, and he probably boosted because he's friends with those people. But, yeah, you cannot give a school every stat and then some of the best cards in the game and not expect there to be repercussions, you know? So you could indirectly nerf these schools' cards to make them have a harder time doing damage, because right now these schools have an easier time doing damage than the actual Storm itself in the meta. Unfortunately, it is what it is, right? Or you could nerf their stats to better line up with the Rochambeau, and, you know, like, if a Death isn't a health school, why do they have so much health? Or if they're not a Pierce school, why do they have so much Pierce? Right? Things like that. So they could go 2 ways about it. Just make it harder to do damage on the schools with, like, superior stats, or just nerf the stats down a bit to actually make it a bit more competitive, because what we have right now clearly isn't working. First Storm you see is actually number 70, and that's Awesome Sauce's Storm on the leaderboard. He's a little bit under captain right now. So it takes 70 players to even see one Storm, you know? And then, I mean, obviously you have a couple more down here, but, like, there's, like, not even 1,700 ranked Storms anymore. There used to be a point where there was, like, 3 consistent Captain Marshall Storms, no matter the meta, but somehow KingStyle has messed up the design so much to make those players quit because of how bad the changes are, and also make the school literally unplayable, right? You can play 5 times better and still lose on this school, and it's absolutely insane. And if you play the school, you'll understand what I'm talking about. If you don't play the school, you might just think, oh, I'm just complaining to complain. Now, an important thing to bring up about the stat thing here is also shield gambits and how easy of a time these middle schools have doing damage, right? So a Myth or a Death can simply try shield every turn, elemental shield every turn, so I can't do any damage to them. They can aura into a hit and bubble and max pips, and then if I bubble, I get ginned and I die. If I just try to trade a hit, I'm probably not going to kill them, and a double buff Jin or Oni is going to kill me. And I have no way of actually setting up my gambits to even be a threat back or kill them, when again I'm a Storm. I'm supposed to be setting things up fast and touching them fast, but you can't do that because the game doesn't allow you to, right? Which is another reason I'm gonna get onto here, is the gambits itself and the library of Storm itself in general. Storm's library is arguably the worst one alongside of Ice. Ice and Storm is horrible, unusable library. Okay. Now, there are a couple of good things about it, like Kraken, but of course that's getting nerfed because every school is running it, you know, which is pretty stupid, but it is what it is, right? I do think OT Fire needs a buff, and nerfing Kraken isn't a bad idea for that. I don't like the fact that because other schools use it better than Storm, it's getting nerfed on a Storm. I just really don't like that game design philosophy change, in my opinion, guys, personally. But back on topic here. I think making Storm's library more about actually setting up gambits fast. So if I catch, they sets up a gambit right away, so it needs to be countered. Therefore, I have pressure, which again would actually suit the identity of Storm, right? If my stats are literally, if I don't have stats, they're so bad to the point they're just turned off and disabled in PvP, like my resist, like my block rating, then my cards at least enable me to be threatening stuff like my gambits, my Jin, my Oni faster than a school can set up a Jin or a hidden bubble, then I'm dead. Which is like literally like 4 rounds in some cases, right? Literally 4 rounds. I've seen Storms die in 3 to 4 rounds to schools that aren't even damage schools, that have no risk to even doing that gambit. So they could go the way about buffing Storm's library and auditing the whole thing. Some changes I thought of personally, guys, is making Thundersnake the old Thundersnake, buffing Lightning Bats to actually have a substantial weakness and maybe do a bit more damage. Hammer Thor just needs a whole audit. Stormwing, pretty good. Golem, it's fine. Barry, pretty good. Hidden Bubble, fine. Caddy, pretty good. Queen, I think Queen's kind of mid in my opinion. Storm Shark is pretty good, but again, it's too low pips with how high the damage is in the meta. If this card was like Trithan or Stormzilla pip cost, I think it would be actually really solid in the meta, in my opinion. Then Kraken, I'd argue, is like your best card, obviously. Then Trithan and Stormzilla, basically unusable in the meta. Teacup is still bugged. A year and 1 month, or month and a half, year and a month and a half after release, still bugged. The heal still doesn't actually, count your outgoing or your buffs on the field, so you're just losing value essentially. But yeah, it's kind of ass. Catch got a pretty substantial buff, I think, sometime last year, which is cool. But again, it's just not enough pressure. It's just not enough damage, right? It's just not enough for Storm. Divum, unusable card. Rusalka, I mean, it got butchered, right? I mean, the damage, we got 40 damage or something, I think. Or, yeah, like 40, 50 damage to lose the whole identity of Rusalka. So that's really good. Great game design, King Sal. You should just put Rusalka back to what it was, what the community liked, but what do I know, right? Or you could talk about, like, Insane Bolt, you know? Like, what are they doing to my boy? What is this? You know? What is this, bro? Also, in general, I wanted to talk about the counters, right? It's obviously impossible to set up a Storm Gambit because of how bad the library is. It doesn't allow you to set them up. But even when you do set them up, let's say you deck set to actually set up a Gambit, the counters to these things are so good. I can maybe set up an Oni, okay? But I myth click Stone Colossus, and then half of my health is done, and then the Yaga the other half. Okay, well, I'm just dead. I can't do anything, right? What about a Thundering Jin, right? I think the issue with Jin more is you cannot access 2 heals before they run out and use them. Personally, I think that's Jin's problem, in my opinion, right now. And obviously, Storm Scion is horrible because Earthquake and Banshee are really overpowered in the meta right now. So you can't even think about doing this because of how oppressive Earthquake and Banshee are. So it's like not even worth packing like 90% of the time. So the library is bad. It doesn't enable you, and the counters are too good. So you could look at making the counters worse, which I wouldn't do that by much because obviously you need counters to Storm in the game, right? They're just way too oppressive and way too overpowered right now in the meta. And I didn't even talk about Banshee, Vampire, by the way, right? I didn't even talk about that at all. So You could do that. The next thing I want to talk about is Storm's healing identity and why this doesn't work and why this was a horrible change to Storm and why a lot of Storms agree and now they're seeing, well, Liam, you're right. This healing change is horrible and it doesn't work on a Storm, right? Healing only can work on a Life because Life has the stats to back it up. And as much as we want to dodge and weave about the combat model, having health, resist, and block is a big deal when you have healing on your school, right? Like I said, it's as simple as shield, aura, hidden bubble, Jin, and I'm literally dead, okay? So me casting a berry or dark and stormy or trying to heal with a storm rat, myth divum or whatever it's called, storm divum, it doesn't matter when I am dead, right? If I had the stats to tank out and maybe heal like a Life, maybe it's a different story, right? It's a different story. But the problem is those schools have way too much damage, way too much pierce and tankability, and I can't threaten them back. It's not even worth me trying to go for healing, right? It's maybe good in like what? The ice matchup, the balance matchup, and that's it. Everyone else's damage is way too high in the meta. Even balance has way too much damage for Barry, Dark and Stormy. I'd argue with Hydra being in the game the way it is right now, and like unbanned cards and stuff like that. So yeah, it is a little wild, I will say that. But I think the healing identity just doesn't work because of how bad your stats are. And as much as we want to make it, you know, the devs might say, oh, it's not about the stats. It is about the stats, right? Life can heal because you can tank. I can tank a Jin and then heal it off. I cannot tank that hit in the first place on a Storm. I can't counter it. I can't set up my own gambit to threaten it back. I can't do anything. I just sit there and I die and I can't do anything about it. I know I can't do anything about it. And then a whole part of my identity doesn't even work, right? So maybe a solution King Sao could do instead, guys, to fix the healing identity of Storm is maybe make Barry or Dark and Stormy set up the gambit, right? So if I Barry, maybe again I'm setting up a gambit in one turn, right? Maybe my Barry, which is 3 rounds, that gives me 1 round to hit, technically, right? Well, it gives you 2, but you have to strike and then you only get 1 round to hit, then it's gone, right? So you get 1 round to hit with Barry. So even if you Barry and it sets up the gambit, you get 1 turn to hit, right? And your opponent could counter that, so it's fair, completely fair, right? So I guess what I'm saying in this video is if you make the library actually set up Storm Gambits really fast to actually apply the pressure according to the combat model, you can make the school good while having your stats be disabled and crippled like they are currently in the meta. But with the current thing we have in the game right now, it's not going to work because there's too many components about the school that just simply don't work or just need super big buffs in the library department. And other schools need to be worse at doing damage because, like I said, Storm is one of the worst schools at doing damage right now in the meta when at the top of the combat model, it's supposed to be the best, right? According to the developers. So I really hope this video, you know, helped a lot of people. And if the devs are watching this, I hope they can listen to this feedback because like I said, man, with the current thing going on, it's kind of sad to see how far the school has fallen. A fan favorite school being this bad for this long is absolutely sad. But let me know your thoughts and feedback down there in the comments below, guys. I hope this video was helpful and I will see you on the next one. Thank you for being here and take care.